Hello, everybody. Welcome to this conversation. I have an amazing guest today. Let's welcome Marina Nabao. She's an amazing embodiment coach and also a holistic sexuality teacher in the Vita program. And it's such a pleasure to have a conversation with you today. Thank you for saying yes to this invitation.
Thank you, Sasha. I'm really glad to be here and to have this moment so that we can discuss things that really matter for us.
So today we wanted to talk about emotional embodiment, how our bodies tell our stories. And that is something that is so important to understand as we move through the world. And it's a very important part of our work, how to read the stories that a body tells and where is it that these bodies show up in our daily life or just in the way in which we stand in the world.
Yes, I think that's something that society has not paid enough attention yet, right? What is it that our bodies carry in terms of our life history, and what is it that our bodies carry in terms of wisdom and healing power, right? I think the same way that the bodies can trap us, they can also be the path for liberation, if that makes sense.
Totally, totally. And
Mm.
those are two very important issues. And I think that um, okay, for me, when I hear how we hold these stories of how our bodies entrap us or entrap an emotion, I can see that because of the training we have. But how would you describe that to somebody that has never heard about this terminology before?
Mm, mm. Okay, I would start by talking about what we can call embodiment, right?
Mhm.
So I call myself an embodiment coach, right? So the invitations that I'm always making to people is connection with their own bodies. And what does that mean? Of course, everybody is living in a body in this incarnated experience, right? But uh, for various reasons, and actually because of the way our cultures are set, most people are completely disconnected from what is actually happening in their bodies.
Mhm.
So, embodiment is the invitation to come back and relate to this body in a very intentional way so
Mhm.
that we learn to notice, to witness whatever is happening, whatever all the information that the body is sending us over and over again. And we learn to understand that this is key for our well being. This is key for our intuition. This is key for our wisdom. And this is also key for us to be in life in a more empowered state, in a more, with a bigger sense of who we really are, regardless of what others are telling us we should believe we are. So for me, there is reclamation of authenticity. There is a reclamation of our core selves. There's a reclamation of the ontology of our beings. When we reclaim this body, when we come back to this body in a very intentional way. Um, so that is I think that is the starting point of this conversation, right?
Yeah.
Um, noticing that the mind, even in terms of human evolution, the mind, the cognitive mind, the language is the last piece that was developed in our brains, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our instincts, our sensations, and then our feelings, our emotions came before our thoughts, before our language, before our capacity to elaborate and create stories about ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So the invitation here is to bring on board the wholeness of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about disconnecting with our thoughts, and it's not about that. That is really important, right? But it's about putting together, bringing on board, and infusing all of that with all the information that comes in our bodies. And of course, as you mentioned, the information that our emotions are bringing up all the time.
I love that you mentioned the intentionality of living in our bodies because I think that that is such a key part, the intentionality, the awareness, the presence. And uh, and also it's interesting to hear that the part that was developed first, that is this body, uh, is the part that we have neglected the most, that we focus more on our thoughts, our language, our feelings, and then just at the very end on our bodies. And how surprising it is to recognize that the key is usually in that very first place in the body.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I don't think that's just an accident. It's not just a coincidence that the body was left behind. This is a historical construction, right? If we think about modern philosophy, I think, therefore I exist,
Mm-hmm.
right? I
Yeah.
think, therefore I exist is an invitation to empower the thought, the rational mind. And
Mhm.
again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I also feel, therefore, I exist.
Yeah.
Therefore, I exist. I also have sensations and I notice my sensations, therefore, I also exist. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, Sasha, is like the age of enlightenment, um, Christian churches having a major role
Mm-hmm.
in separating us from the body, in teaching people, teaching a culture that actually sees the body as sinful, right? That's
Ah,
something that is dirty, and that no wonder we're so disconnected from our bodies today,
yeah.
because there is all this process and even this worldview of what is from the body is more wild, and then it's not as developed, it's not as smart, it's almost like second class, it's
Mm-hmm.
animal like,
Yeah.
right? So so yes, we are disconnected from these bodies, and it's not just because we want, it's because we reproduce our culture, we reproduce our conditionings, right? And what and I think that is even very curious, that what modern neuroscience is telling us today is like, oh, your body has all the information you need. Your body has so much healing capacity. Your body has um, attuning to this body is so important for you to live a whole life, right? That now some circles, and we know this is not but now some circles are opening up more to the idea that the body is actually so important in the way that we live our lives.
Totally. I think that that is such an important point. How culture uh, divorced us from nature, as if existing or being a human being kind of meant dominating everything else. There is a domination over nature, a domination over women, a domination over emotions, a domination over the physical needs, and this idea that
Mm.
spirituality equals overcoming the body and treating the body as something that you can remove like a piece of clothing. I remember being taught that very early in the 90s, like, oh, you just have to remove, eventually your body will be left behind like a dress in the closet, and you will change to another body. And the truth is that how a what a tragedy that is, how tragic it is to think of the body as something disposable, because that's the very same way that we think about nature, that we conceive the whole world. Instead of
Mm.
seeing that like a whole uh, universe, that it's interconnected and that it's constantly depending one on the balance of the other, we are learning to have to dominate. Meditating, yeah, in this Western in this patriarchal mode means overcoming any thought and overcoming any feeling, and it doesn't matter that you're feeling that your skin is being pierced by pain. You have to disconnect from your body and transcend into, and as powerful as it sounds, it is a tragedy because the body is being left behind and is being neglected, and with it we are just reproducing the drama of existence, and that shows in the microcosmic and in the macrocosmic. That shows in how we treat ourselves and in how we treat others and in how we treat the planet. We have been treating the planet as if it was disposable and we could just change to Mars. Once we're done with this one, we will move to Mars. Now we need to take care of this one first. And that's the same culture. So what happens when we come back to the body and we realize that the body has been craving desperately to be seen and heard and tended to?
Mm. For me, the word that comes to mind is magic. Magic starts happening
Yeah.
when we really allow ourselves to reconnect, right? To to feel all that is to be felt here, to notice, to be present, to accept, to love, to gain clarity around what is going on in our inner world. I think that's the path to magic, right? And that's the path that for me that is a spiritual path, as opposed to the opposite, as opposed to, oh, I need to leave my body so that I can feel, so I can know my spirituality, my understanding, and my my whole view of the world is exactly the opposite. It's we get to know our divinity through our energy, through our emotions, through our sensations, right? And I think that what happens to a person who does the work, because it is a lot of work, to become embodied, right?
Yeah.
To really do this reverse process of coming back and reclaiming and learning and all of it, is that we actually tap into our most divine potential,
Mm.
our most authentic pieces, our most the truth of who we are and what we're meant to be doing here.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. It's about traps of the minds, of the lies, of the conditionings, of so many cultural conditionings um, that we inherited generation after generation, right? It's
Yeah.
it's it's setting ourselves free of that. That's why I usually say that for me embodiment is a path. It's not the only one, but it is one path for liberation of the mind, the body, and the spirit.
Mm.
I think in what you shared, Sasha, uh, around the, this disconnection of the body, also meaning the disconnection from nature,
Yeah.
and then bringing a little bit of the patriarchy to the table and the history of humanity, the history of this system that that dominates and sees the world from a male lens. Um, and we are seeing now how much this is causing harm to everybody, how
Yes.
much this is causing harm to the planet, to our ecology, and to individuals, you
Yeah.
know. So I also think that embodiment is so important because it does connect us to our um, animal nature, because we cannot
Mhm.
forget that we are also animals. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter that we can think, that we can create I don't know, an airplane that is able to fly. It doesn't matter. We're still animals. We still have
Yeah.
instincts. We still have an animal brain, right? Our reptilian brain that is completely set up to make us function as animals,
Yeah.
so that we avoid threats, so that we know when to run, when to fight, when to freeze, when to fawn, and so on. So what comes up for me is that the journey of embodiment is also a journey of reconnection with our wild selves, with our animal selves, that will translate into a deeper reconnection with the planet, with the land, with the soil, with the earth, right?
Yes.
And I think that in itself
We froze for a moment. Okay. Sorry.
that's okay. I was saying that I think in itself this is deeply revolutionary.
Yes, totally, totally, totally agree. And as I hear you, I think of the generations before us. And I think, for example, of people that I know that have focused strongly on overcoming any sensation in their body until they become sick, like really, really sick. Like you can see that in their body. I'm thinking of people of the age of my mom, for example, her generation, that they were hard workers. They were wired to just overcome a lot of obstacles, even when it cost them their health. I see people that never take a break, never stop, never listen until they feel sick, until their bodies break. And you can start seeing how their bodies show that, how they start hunching down, how they start just having difficulty moving and pain. And it just feels like their bodies start screaming and yelling for attention. Uh, and it shows the story of years and years of neglect. And we are speaking about a gently approach, but in reality, this has been a desperate need for such a long time for so many people. It's just that they didn't know that they were even capable of getting in touch with their body. Just that mere notion sounds totally radical, like you just said, revolutionary, because the idea that they could listen instead of taming the body, instead of of forcing their own bodies into doing, receiving, having sex, forcing their bodies into sex, forcing their bodies into labor, into doing things, into working hard, into working without rest until the day is over, even if they need to take a seat and take a breath. They just keep pushing, and if they don't, they think that they are weak, that they just need to keep going, that they should just have some vitamins, that they should just like this keep pushing mentality that at the end of the day breaks people. And that's one thing that I really want to discuss, how it shows in the body, like literally shows in the body. How when you are a skill coach, you can notice and read a person's corporality, how they are standing, how their bodies are formed. I used to have this amazing teacher that would read people, like, okay, when people have a bigger an open chest, when they have a hunch back, when they have a thin body, when they have like a skinny body, like all of these things, a little belly, how all of these parts are usually resonating with an emotional wound.
Yes, yeah. So I think I want to go back to a piece of what you were saying because I think that that is such an important discussion as well. You were talking about people pushing themselves to work harder, no rest, nothing, right? And how the bodies start calling for help, right? And then feeling pain, developing disease, and so on. There is no way we can have this discussion, for me at least, without bringing up the theme of capitalism,
Yeah.
of the means of productivity
Hmm.
these days,
Hmm.
right? And this, when I say these days, I'm talking about hundreds of years of capitalistic domination. But yeah, so it it doesn't matter if a person is working 12 hours a day on a land, in a piece of land, in a farm, doing very heavy manual work, or if the person is working in front of a computer for the same 12 hours with no break.
Hmm.
Both situations are extremely violent to our bodies, right?
Hmm.
And both will bring will have results, will have outcomes in our bodies, right? I used to tell my clients, most of my clients are many hours a day, and
Hmm.
I tell them, and they usually say, oh, I don't feel my body, I'm feeling numb. I have so many clients who look for my work because they want to feel more sexual pleasure, they want to reconnect with their libidos, their desires, and so on, right? Just like you. um, so, and what I say is that, of course, you're not feeling your body. Of course, you're numb. There is a process here that happened that forced your very wise body to turn off some of your sensations so that you could keep functioning and you wouldn't feel the things that are happening. So if you have to sit down in a desk, in a closed office, no nature around, nothing, air conditioning all day long, and you stay there for 15 hours sometimes, your system, your nervous system will say, ooh, this is not ideal. This is too much computer, blah, blah, blah. Too little contact with nature, with the soil, with the land. And then the nervous system will play tricks to adapt,
Yeah.
right? So, one trick that the nervous system plays is making us numb. so that we don't feel. If I need to sit on this chair for 15 days every day for years, maybe I shouldn't be feeling my pelvis anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't be feeling my sacrum anymore or my spine because it's too painful to feel it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we start numbing out, we start losing that connection. And I think it's the same for a person who's been working too hard. That person's in a land doing manual work, that person's nervous system will look for ways to soften the suffering,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So don't feel it so much. But the problem with not feeling so much is that then things accumulate. And when you notice, you have developed um, chronic disease, you have developed this huge back pain because of your posture, and so on. So for me, Sasha, what I'm trying to get at here is that unless we also reflect and reevaluate this way of living,
Mm-hmm.
the body will keep suffering
Yeah.
because the body is not meant for this way of living the same way nature is not meant for this human presence in the way that we're dealing with nature, right?
Yeah.
So the way that we consume, the way that we use natural resources, this is not a healthy way. The
Yeah.
same way it's not healthy the way that we put our bodies into constant stress and overwhelm. Not to say about trauma and the things that actually happen to us, and not even going there,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I'm staying here in the things that we do. And if we don't have this acknowledgement that this way of living in the West, this way of living in developed countries, and this way of I need to be producing all the time and I need to be consuming all the time. It's producing and consuming all the time, all the
Mm-hmm.
time, all the time. Unless we reevaluate that, it's very hard to really shift our perceptions and our relationships with our bodies and with the environment. Did that make sense to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really feel that when it comes to life, just as when it comes to the body, uh, it starts speaking slowly and gently, and it just says, hey, move me, right? The body just says, I need a little bit of movement, and we ignore it, and it just starts feeling numb until something is bigger, comes a bigger weight and says, I'm telling you to move me, and you just feel it as, like this bigger pain, but you ignore it again, and you get used to that until you feel like such an intensity because your body starts screaming for attention. And so I think the same happens with life. I always say that there is a moment in which life just literally throws you against the wall and it says, I'm telling you to listen. And I think the body does that. It's just like, I'm telling you, listen. And the same happens in reverse. When we listen, we don't need to go to those stages. When we listen, we can avoid so much pain and so much suffering. And I just had an amazing experience with a client that and I'm sharing this because she even shares that in her beautiful testimonial. And where she learned to listen to her body so deeply that she felt when something was deeply wrong, and that saved her life. That just, even when the doctors told her that she was wrong, that there was nothing in her perception of danger, that there was nothing wrong with her physically, that she was just exaggerating, she knew that something was wrong. She insisted, she went to two different doctors, and it was then that they were able to discover something that could have killed her hadn't she gone on time. So that's what happens when we listen. We can avoid the being smashed against the wall experience, and we can actually
Yes.
listen on time. And that starts with small, that starts with a little, with listening to a desire, with asking the body, with creating a bridge, a communication bridge from the wisdom of our body into our conscious mind.
Yes, yes, totally. It starts small, yes. And it starts by listening, yes, noticing, yes, and then honoring that
Mm,
desire that you that your body has, right? So if I'm here sitting with you and my body's like, you need to stand up, you need to stretch, right? It's not just saying, oh, I understand that my body wants to stretch and not doing anything. It's like, oh, I understand that my body needs a stretch. And now I will honor that desire and will stretch a little bit,
yeah,
right? I
exactly.
think that piece when we are working with embodiment is that it's not just about noticing, it's not just about paying attention, it's about what do you do with that information.
Hmm.
And the more we honor the desires and not just the desires, the requests from our bodies, the more trust we build, the more this relationship becomes more intimate and
Hmm.
deeper,
Yeah.
right? And then again, the word that comes for me again is magic. And then the magic happens because then we create such an intimate relationship with our
Yeah.
sensations, emotions, impulses, instincts that we can walk in this life with so much more power, with so much more wisdom, really,
Yeah.
because we trust and we know and we build that connection. I really like the metaphor of a bridge that he used. You need to build the bridge, right? And once you do that, it's so beautiful. So many things start happening. Um, and and it's not that so many things start happening as if we become passive beings and magic happens to us. It's actually the opposite. We become so empowered of who we actually are, so aware of our agency and all of that, that we become the creators,
Hmm.
right? The creators of things, the creators of the ways that we want to live life, the ways that we want to express ourselves, the ways like ways that we want our voices to be heard by the doctors when I say there is something wrong here.
Yeah.
You need to investigate more,
Hmm.
right? So, and then, yes, to the extent of a person being able to save her life, right?
Exactly.
Isn't that magical?
Totally. And then uh, it also happens to release pain and suffering that we were almacenating, that we were holding back in our body. When we start listening, there is like this, um, uh, like the water faucet that you open, and all of a sudden, after you haven't used it in a long time, and you open it and the water comes dirty at first, and you start listening and it's erratic also, like, and then it starts just throwing dirty water, and after a while the water starts running clean again. I feel like that's exactly what happens with our body. When we open the faucet, it starts going, and it's dirty and it's messy, and it can be scary at first, and then you stay present and you start finding such a beautiful treasure underneath that initial scary reaction.
Yes, yes. And for me, what you're describing, Sasha, is pretty much the healing process that we can go through once we allow ourselves to live a more embodied life, right? Because,
Yeah.
yes, the body carries a lot traumas, memories of very sad moments, not necessarily only traumatic. All of it is in our bodies, right?
Yeah.
And when we do allow ourselves to release some of that from our nervous system, yes, we also go into these messy places of like cleaning up stuff, stuff coming out all over the place, and also finding a place of coherence and more organization
Yes.
after that, right? So when we walk through that path, it can be messy, it can be difficult at moments. And afterwards, further ahead in that same path, we can find so much more resolution, coherence for the things that we need resolution and coherence for. Yeah.
Yes. That's so important because I have found that people mostly feel afraid of listening. Like, what will happen if I listen? What will I find? Will I find something that, if I listen, I will discover that I'm angry and that I will let my anger loose, or I will discover that I have a lot of grief and I haven't really wanted to touch that grief, and I will discover that I feel, you know, sadness, or there is fear about touching those parts. And that's precisely why we need to get in touch in a safe manner, with a good container, with a safe container, because it can be messy at first, but it's always important.
Yes. And when I come across my fear, my anger, my anxiety, my whatever, my reply question would be, how much does it cost you not to see those pieces of you?
Yeah.
Who do you become when you don't allow yourself to be angry, when you don't allow yourself to acknowledge your sadness, your grief, right? We're living in a world pandemic right now. Can we ignore our losses? Can we really? Would that cost to us
Yeah.
if we did? If we put it under the carpet and pretend it's not there,
Yeah.
right? So I think there's that in and yes, having a container with a professional, with someone who can really support you there in a safe enough way is essential. Yes. And still, sometimes it's going to be painful. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's very hard for people to come across emotions that they're not familiar with.
Yeah.
It's very hard,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah, sometimes it's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
But how much more difficult it is to walk in life and to lead your life, ignore how you feel, what's going on with yourself,
Yeah.
right? It's like we walk around with missing pieces of us,
Yeah.
as if we were an incomplete
Puzzle.
um, puzzle,
Mhm.
that doesn't have all the pieces, because we don't look at those pieces, we don't acknowledge those pieces, much less accept, love, and integrate those pieces, right? And the invitation for me in the work that I do, and I'm sure it's the same invitation in the beautiful work that you do, is for integration, so that we can walk as whole the pieces that we have with all that we are, which is so much richer,
Yeah,
It's so much more complex, it's so much more colorful, it's so much more layered,
yeah,
right?
totally. I love that. Integration is the key.
I
It's
think
really the
you're
key.
on mute.
Oh,
No, it's me,
yeah,
sorry, hold on.
yeah, yeah. Don't worry. There we are.
Sorry about that.
It's totally fine. So I love that you say integration. Integration is key. That is such an important part, and I always like to bring that up. Like uh, we are a village of different parts, of many parts. Our psyche is a village of people and of parts of ourselves in different moments and of our existence, and they just need to integrate, to work together, to learn how to do the work together. And um, that is something that I really would like to invite people to do, to look for the proper support, because it's important to feel, and support can be eventually a book, it can be a coach, it can be a process, a group process, but to look for support. We don't need to do this alone. We can get the support of people that have walked through this path before, and sometimes it's just by reading a book or sharing material, and sometimes it means embarking in a coaching journey, but allowing ourselves to be held during this process, because it's difficult. Learning to listen to the voice of our bodies, it's difficult, yet it is the most beautiful journey that we can embark ourselves in.
Yes, yes. And also, Sasha, we heal in presence.
Yeah.
We're we're human beings. We're social beings, right? We're made for community. We were made for relationships.
Yes.
As much as so many people want to believe the opposite, it's not. We were made to be social beings. So healing, developing ourselves, improving parts of us, integrating pieces of us, this all needs witnessing.
Yes.
This all needs holding. This all needs presence, right? And yes, it could be professional presence, but sometimes it's your family, it's your children who can also witness you
Mhm.
and be a loving presence, right? But for me, there is this deep calling that I have within myself to remind people that we heal in partnership, in presence, in relationship to others, whether that's your coach, your therapist, your teacher, your neighbor, your partner. It doesn't really matter,
Mhm.
but it matters that we have others with us.
Yes.
And I can't emphasize that enough.
Totally. I agree with that fully, fully. That's so important.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. And where can people find you and find your work?
Thank you. So good to be here. So I have a website, marinanabao.com. I think you can write that down on the
Yeah.
podcast description, right?
Yes.
And also Instagram. I'm on Instagram as Marina Nabao. Um, and I post sometimes I post there. I yes. And on my website people can subscribe to my newsletter. I send an email once a month, not a lot.
Hmm.
And because I'm also reviewing my relationship, so I'm very much taking care of the pace that makes sense to me and to the work that I do. And yes, I offer online 101 embodiment coaching sessions.
Mhm.
For people who really want to take this journey of connecting with the body, learning to be present, to relate with intention, to gently heal traumas, overwhelm, and stress, so that we can be fully integrated and lead us into thriving, right? Whatever that means to you. I don't have a model of thriving as well, so we can co create that together.
I love that. That's amazing. Thank you so much for this
Mm,
beautiful conversation. I will leave the links below so that people can find them.
mm,
And it's beautiful to see you, and
mm,
thank you for joining.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.